week, and BizChat Weekly starts now. Joining me, of course, are our resident analysts. Ken Gishinga, CEO, Mentoria, is in our town studio. William Odembo Ramogi, who also works at Elim Capital, is joining us virtually together with the good gentleman Wohoro Ndoho. Gentlemen, good to see you on the show once again. I want us to start with that story that I think one of the latest legislations that has happened, this week about members of parliament reviewing some of the requirements that employers need not to look at when they are considering getting, employees and staff. So part of the things that are now going to be scrapped off the list of any person's, requirements when they're applying for jobs is HELB, KRA clearance certificate, among so many others, things like certificate of good conduct. And they were saying that job seekers must not prove they are not criminals. Gishinga, I'd like you to go first on this. What are your quick reactions, and are we risking seeing more defaults in the country now as you are not even needed to show your credit history to get a job?
Many thanks, Brian George. I think that piece of legislation is quite thoughtful. It did a bit of research, and it showed that state agencies earn about 750 million shillings from all the different types of requirements needed to get a job. So I think looking at the high levels of unemployment, the last thing you want to do is to reduce the likelihood of people to get jobs. So I think if they can amend it to say maybe only for shortlisted candidates will you be able to require these things, or even maybe give a conditional offer where we say, hey, you've been given this job, but it's a conditional offer. Now you go and bring the documents. I think that would be a much more sensible approach.
William, Gishinga says we don't need to have an open door policy. We need to give a bit of conditionalities, like there's a contract, or there is only for those who are shortlisted to be allowed not to come with those documents. What do you think of that?
No, I think, first of all, yes, I think this piece of legislation is very progressive. I'm in total support. All indications were to the point that there were just barriers to employment or access to employment for the youth. Most of them usually give up somewhere along the line. They lose opportunities because they cannot access them. I'm to join some board, so I've been trying to get my police clearance for the last 3 weeks. And apparently I'm to wait for another 3 weeks. It's 1.5 months. Then I'm thinking, if this was supposed to be a job, it would have gone so fast. But more importantly, I'm not of the opinion that even the shortlisted candidates should be asked to bring some of these documents. I'm not even for the opinion that the offer should be conditional. I think some of these things, really, you can just go into the system and ask CID to avail them digitally, and an employer can do due diligence on their end. You can actually just go to the CRB and ask, okay, what is the credit record of this person? The way banks do, you can go to HELB and ask HELB, does this person owe you money? From their website. After you have at least shortlisted, you have 2 candidates. That's not a lot of work. You can actually go to the DCI's website if they provide such a platform and confirm, is this person cleared? So that then we really make life easy. We are in the digital age. You don't have to provide documentation that can fit into Times Towers. And really all this data is available online. My 2 cents.
Wohoro, you've listened to the first 2 submissions right there. Quite comical, I would say. What are your quick reactions about that legislation, Wohoro?
Branchi, I think we've made history today. All 3 of us agree on something. So to my 2 colleagues, I'd say absolutely. 2 things. One, all those conditions presumed Kenyans to be criminals in the first instance. When you go to a job, actually that's a HR function. That should be done by the company that's hiring, doing its own due diligence, as my brother just said. The fact that they presumed us to be guilty, that's what the whole system basically did. The second thing, of course, was just removing the rent-seeking aspect to that whole recruitment business. I think it's a good day, and hopefully to be permanent. In fact, maybe it should be embedded in the constitution so that you don't ask such silly questions about someone's. Assume everyone is innocent unless they prove otherwise. And so I think in the same ways you is a bit more uhuru to us as Kenyan citizens when you're looking for jobs.
Well, I'm going to let you go first also on this second question. The timing of this legislation, we are going into an electioneering period. Are you not reading any sinister moves, or it is genuine?
Well, we've just entered, in a sense, the silly season as far as Kenyan politics. We're going to hear all manner of promises and all manner of strange decisions being made. But on the whole, I think it's a good thing. I think our government is most sensitive to citizens round about now, just before elections. And of course, the day after elections, then we all go back to the old way. But at this point in time, I think it's the most important time for citizens to really mobilize to seek to secure a better future.
Gishinga, is this the only way to make employment or access to employment easier and safer, or are there any better ways? I mean, are these legislations enough to, enable the work environment to become easier for job seekers?
No, definitely there are much easier ways. We are in the digital era, we're in the social media era, and the rise of social media and tools that can help a country, number one, first assess its level of unemployment, and number two, be able to build a CV database for anybody who's unemployed, and number three, so we have digital tools. And one would imagine, this week we've been talking about social media, but I think the ability to use these technologies to actually measure unemployment and to use them to actually create opportunities, I think that's a more profound approach that we should explore.
Great. William, as we bring this discussion to a close, Uhuru right there mentions that this should be much more of an in-house issue, really, of an employer, of a potential employer, other than a legislative issue that is at a national level. But he also asserts that if we could have it somewhere in the employment laws and everything, it would be, much more comfortable for these laws to be put to action, even by the private sector. What do you have to say about that, William?
Well, the laws are actually, in fact, what we are discussing today, that for the fact that it had to take a legislative action for the country to realize that the requirements being asked of young people are just, one, too many, two, too expensive,
sure, and
restrictive on the number of people that can access employment, is in fact, worrying. That we need to have a macro level discussion around what are the requirements to employ a Kenyan. In other words, the qualifications are not sufficient, is worrying. But yes, at the policy level, I think we need to have it, because the micro systems of organizations or of employers have been influenced to believe that every young person that they are about to hire is a suspect, and they have to treat them as such and ask them for too many documentation. It's the cost of having a society that does not uphold integrity. And so that then, you have to treat everybody with suspicion. But at the macro level, yes, we probably need to have it in law that, look, treat people with dignity.
Sure.
We are all innocent until proven guilty. Accord people an equal opportunity to access employment, whether they have some of this documentation in place or they don't.
Great. Many thanks. We're going to let that discussion rest there. Let's now dive into one that perhaps, was one of the biggest stories of the internet this week. KRA and denying people soft life, or otherwise checking on people's social media profiles and juxtaposed with their tax returns. And they're saying there are so many of us who are, reporting or filing nil returns, and yet we are living lavish lifestyles on social media. William, I'll go with you first. Again, how practical is this move?
When I saw this, it reminded me of an advertisement I saw on Facebook that I could buy a piece of land in Scotland, or 1 square foot, and become Lord William of House Ramogi, Earl of Aberdeenshire, somewhere in Scotland. And this would now be a title I could put on Facebook and Twitter. I wonder how the KRA would treat that, because on one hand, I am a lord by title, but on the other, I'm just another hustler in Kenya, surviving somewhere in Kibera. The point is, really, the reality of social media is very different from the reality of our lives.
Sure.
And to depend on social media then to inform the government of where you are economically or financially is presumptuous. And I don't think it will end well, because what we portray on social media, I saw someone comment that they need to have a provision for sponsors and some of those functions or trips which are given by the employers, because really there are too many factors at play on social media, and I don't think KRA appreciates that. So for me, it's just bollocks, but I think they need to go back to the drawing board.
Wahoro, in all honesty, KRA has tax revenue targets to meet and a legacy to secure for the president, who will be in power for less than the next 10 months. I mean, we have, seen a lot of action, both at the court level, where minimum tax has been suspended, and the president is saying, hey guys, please go slow on this judicial activism. So we are still on the practicality of what KRA is trying to do. Don't you think they're trying too hard, or this can also pass as one of those ways of, getting these taxes and reporting them in their revenue?
When I first heard it, I responded exactly like William, this is silly, what have you. But if you are to project the future in the next 5 years, our entire future will be
Okay, we apologize for that. Uhuru seems to be having network issues. Gishinga, I'm going to ask you still on the question about the practicability of this move by KRA. How practical is it? Now that some of us have fake names on social media, we are barely identifiable by our ID names or our national official names.
It's not very practical. If you look at the 4 principles of taxation, really, the 4 principles of taxation, number 1 is a good tax policy should be just, it should be efficient, and it should be easy to administer. The ability for it to administer such a policy would be very difficult, because if you look at, let's say you have about 5 million Kenyans on iTax, and assuming each of those Kenyans has 1 or 2, 3 social media pages, that's about 14 million pages, 15 million pages that you have to look at.
Sure.
Which means even if you had a whole floor at KRA that looks at that, it would be impossible. But I think it's also important to remind Kenyans that social media has its place in economic policy. If you go to Zambia, they actually, last year, they implemented a plan where you can use WhatsApp to pay your taxes. In monetary policy, if you go to the Bank of England, they actually look at social media postings to be able to look at the price levels of goods and services, to be able to estimate inflation. Now, that's monetary policy. So we should not disregard the place of social media in economic policy. It can provide real-time, game-changing information, but I think in the way that it's been contemplated here in Kenya, it seems a bit not fully thought through.
I was going to ask you that on the benchmark and who we need to benchmark from to be able to, effect this or implement this effectively. But Wahoro, we lost you at some point. Kindly, could you finish your submission, sir?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can get you.
Okay, all I'm saying is that while it was easy to laugh initially, I actually think there's a far more serious angle to what KRA is doing. And I'm saying we all live our lives like an avatar. There's a digital self, and in fact, we live in a world where our digital self is more important than our physical self as far as our transactions in the world are concerned. So to me, this is the first of actually a new trend where Well, it looks silly now, but I think in a few years we will look back and see this was actually the thin end of a much bigger wedge in making us accountable, even in our digital selves. Because right now that is anonymous. You can play that game being anonymous. But what KRA is signaling is the majority of your life is going to be lived in the digital age as far as your financial self. And therefore, watch this space. I think KRA is up to something here.
Okay, KRA is up to something, and let's see how effective that is going to get. William, your 1 minute submission of how best to enact this. If there are any benchmarks, if there are any countries we can learn from, please take it away in a minute.
Well, I think Ken has already provided the benchmark.
Sure.
He mentioned of Zambia and the English policy around it. In terms of the how, I think there is more truth on LinkedIn than there is on Facebook. Even LinkedIn is quite hyped up because we say of things that we did or we achieved at our employment. Many times, really, that's not the case. A janitor may call themselves a very lofty name on LinkedIn. And if KRA was to follow that, it would still be interesting. And so, I saw a post somewhere that the M-Pesa statement would be more accurate in terms of trying to tell my economic situation than my Facebook or my Twitter or even LinkedIn, because that now shows my interactions with money, where I was. And if, for example, I'm saying that I'm reporting zero, and I spend my evenings at the Java as opposed to my normal Kibandaski, then of course that's a conversation I should have with KRA, how I'm affording all those coffee dates. And so for me, I think the mobile money wallet has more financial data to offer KRA than my Facebook account.
Wahoro, there's the bombshell right there. The mobile money platform has more information to offer to KRA other than the social media platform, of course, Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and all these others. Wouldn't that amount to infringing into personal property or personal information, Wahoro?
Oh, that's precisely my point. As I say, KRA is recognizing that our digital self is a much more important indicator of us, and it's going to increasingly become that than our physical selves. So the notion that KRA will not come after revenue in a digital space is just not feasible. So to me, I think William sort of confirms my bias here, that our digital selves is going to be the real self that, as far as our revenue and our spending, is all captured somewhere digitally. And while we might laugh at KRA chasing us with our social media, when you put all that intelligence together regarding Wahoro in social media and his M-Pesa spending and his bank transactions, which are all digital, you may be surprised how much more accurate they'll be at estimating Wahoro's expenditure than in probably any other system they've ever had in their history. It will be complicated initially, but let me tell you, I think that this is the future, and I think we need to take a lot of cognizance of exactly what's happening. And it's a much bigger picture. It's a much bigger agenda here than we appreciate right now.
Ken, in under a minute or so, I'm going to ask you two questions. So one, does KRA have the manpower to even monitor that and even achieve what they're trying to achieve? And in that same breath, we have seen Nairobi City County digitizing their revenue collection, methods, their revenue collection mechanisms. A report by KRA, that is the Commission on Revenue Authority, showed that Nairobi County can actually facilitate up to 236% of its operations independently without depending on the exchequer for any money. So we want to just have a look at that. In under a minute or so, does KRA have the power? And talk to us about your quick reactions on the KRA, on Nairobi's move to digitize its revenue collection. Ken.
Well, I think to the first question, there is a privacy issue that has to be raised, in terms of really following people around. But I think more broadly speaking, KRA has a big school, the Kenya Revenue School of Authority, which many countries come to benchmark with, and people get expert training. So to expect graduates of such a prestigious program to be reduced into sitting into a room and going through your Facebook profiles, really, it means you are really undermining the human capital that is present at the authority, and really, you are really making people's career much worse. But I think on the second part of the city-county digitizing it, absolutely. And I think a big chunk of that revenue coming from the Nairobi city-county when it's digitized, it's really coming from the land rates, where we have the property valuations and the new land rates coming through. I think if we go that direction, and that's the direction most cities have gone, where you're able to digitize and be able to collect land rates, I think Nairobi County will not even need sort of like its proportional distribution from the national kit, because it'll be able to raise enough money to fund its hospitals, its education, and its infrastructure.
And its other devolved services.
But Ken,
Uhuru, in under 30 seconds, please.
I'll just say, okay, I'm just saying to Ken, Ken, it's true, we cannot hire our best graduates to be doing the menial work. But the reality is this, the future is digital, it is here now. The reality is, the government already knows far more about you than probably anyone else in your life. And so the fact that they are now moving to this space, it behooves us to just appreciate the fact that our own lives are currently lived digitally. And so even though they're recruiting the best, they're going to be recruiting the best out there. And I can tell you for free, they will not be doing chasing you on Facebook. They have algorithms for that.
Okay.
The question is that do we appreciate the fact that this is a signal to a new normal?
Great.
Brian,
we're gonna continue. Gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all the time we had. Many thanks. William Odhiambo right there, CEO of Elim Capital. We have been speaking also to Ken Gishinga, who is also CEO Mentoria, a research firm on economics, and of course, Uhuru Ndoho of Sandbox Capital. We will be coming back with more. The BBC Money Daily will be here. You're watching Business Today. Don't go too far.